Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining us. Today we meet a photographer who's creating some rather amazing images. His name is Paul Oellermann, and I'll spell that for you in a minute. He lives here in Tauranga, but first let me briefly introduce myself, and then I can tell you how I met Paul. My name's Kim Westerskov. I'm a professional nature photographer, writer. I've been teaching photo workshops for about 8 or 9 years. The first ones were with the University of Waikato's ongoing education program. The government pulled the plug on those, and I ran several with Bob Tulloch. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, I started running photo workshops from my own studio in Gate Pa. The very first of those that I ran, Paul came to, and I've known Paul ever since. He came to a few more, but he doesn't need to anymore because he knows everything. Every month I run what I call a photos and coffee evening for anyone that's interested in photography, and these are friendly and we have quite a lot of fun. Paul's been a regular at these for years. People try not to be the photographer after Paul because Paul's photos are usually so good that they kind of set a standard that's hard to follow. Another local photographer who Paul didn't know came to these. Her name was Pauline, and they got chatting, they got on well, they got on even better, and they got married recently. So there's either some brownie points in that for me, or depending on how well they're getting on, or not brownie points, not sure, but it's kind of nice. Paul has experimented with and developed a number of rather specialised techniques over the years, and one of the nice things about Paul is how open he is about sharing these with others. If he becomes more a total full-time professional, I don't know whether that'll stay like that or not, but so far he's been very good at sharing. About 3 years ago I said, be interested in running a workshop and sharing some of these techniques with other photographers. Paul said, sure, so we did. And people came from Palmerston North and New Plymouth and Tauranga and elsewhere. And it was so popular we ran a second one, and then we ran a third one just a few months ago. A few months ago, Paul ran an exhibition at Creative Tauranga, which attracted considerable interest, and Paul tells me particularly people coming and asking, how did you do that, which we can talk about later, and it resulted in a good number of sales. So that's probably enough in the way of introduction. For those of you out there, if you're interested in Paul's work, he's got a few of them here. I don't know how well they show up on video, but if you Google Paul Oellermann, Oellermann, and you might need to put the word photo after that. On my computer it just comes up straight away, and that'll take you straight to Paul's fine work. So Paul, let's not start with the obvious questions about your earlier life and why you do it, which we can get to later, but let's start with that exhibition that you had a few months ago, because in a sense that's you making it as a photographer. Tell me about that, how it went.
Yeah, that was great. It was quite an experience, going through the process of working towards the exhibition and figuring out which images to put up, and basically getting everything printed and framed.
A lot more work than it looks, probably.
Yes, much more work than it looked. It turned out to be a hell of a lot of work, but most rewarding. And then the exhibition itself, getting everything packed in, and just working with the ladies at Creative Tauranga to get everything sorted and ready. It was a fantastic experience. The exhibition itself went off very well, as you said. Got a few sales.
You got more than a few.
Yeah,
you got quite a few sales, which is great.
Yeah, which is always good.
People don't buy them just to be nice; they buy them because they like them.
Yeah, so. Well, that's the thing that we sort of found out along the way. Art is one of those difficult things to sell because it's not something that people need. It's something that people would want, and getting to part with their hard-earned dollars can be quite difficult at times. So it's quite gratifying to see people happy enough to pay for your art. So the exhibition went off really well, and the opening night was well attended.
I got there too late for the salmon thingies. I got one of them, I think.
Yes,
they went quickly.
The snack went off very quickly. I didn't even get to have any myself. But yeah, that all went off very well, and had, in the process of the exhibition, had two days where I attended for people to come have a chat, and yeah, there were a few people that came around, some straight off the street, others who had seen the invite on Facebook or wherever, and yeah, I had some good in-depth conversations with people who were just curious as to...
Were these all technical questions or more wide-ranging than that?
A lot of them were technical questions. If you can call... How do you do that?
That's a technical question,
yes.
Yeah. In your case, yeah.
Yes. So, a lot of curiosity as to how you actually create the various different pieces of artwork. There's a few different types of photography that were up at the exhibition, and something a bit different to what. Did
you meet many or any of the people that bought your work? And if you did, what kinds of people were they? Were they other photographers, or were they just general public, or
most of them were just general public. I don't know. I'm not sure if there were other photographers that bought, but I know by and large the sales went to just the general public, people who appreciate it for art value as such.
Which makes sense, doesn't it? It's other photographers aren't going to buy other photographers' work generally, are they? They're going to try and steal your ideas, maybe, but they're not going to buy it.
Themselves,
so it would be general public.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Every day there's 1.8 billion photos that get uploaded to the internet, and 350 million of those are on Facebook. And we know what they're like, the Facebook ones. They're me and my party and my cat and my holiday was better than yours and my party and my other party and what I look like at wherever I happen to be. And this tends to devalue photography in the eyes of many people, because photography is so easy. But good photography is still good photography. Great photography is still great photography. And it's the job of real photographers to distinguish themselves from the Facebook type. And Paul has definitely managed to do this. His work stands out. It's very obviously the kind of imagery that couldn't be taken by a Facebook type photographer. Do you want to tell us a bit about your techniques now? Or what makes your work different, and how you've, I think, quite deliberately made your work so that people looking at it can't say, oh, I could have got that. Because they'll look at it and they think, oh, I couldn't have got that. I wonder what you did.
Yes, and you're quite correct in this day and age. To stand out, to have something different is a bit of a challenge, because there is so much out there. And there's a lot of photographers doing fantastic stuff.
It's a problem, isn't it?
Yes.
It's inspiring, but it's a worry at the same time.
So I have a few different genres of photography. There's long exposure landscapes, the more regular type landscapes, which you see a lot of.
That's a long exposure one isn't it? Yeah.
That's an example of a long exposure landscape.
That's lovely. I like that one. So you don't have to go far to get photos like that. That's so here at the mount.
That one's taken down on the side of the mount. A lot of, and especially for the exhibition, a lot of all of what I had up there was local and that was a big theme behind the exhibition,
Yeah.
of portraying what we have around us in a different light, showing it off in a different way, and hopefully getting people interested in the countryside around them.
Did you get much feedback from people at the exhibition about that, like saying, "Oh, I didn't know that we had that," or
Yes.
anything like that?
Yes, there were a few comments about, "Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't seen that before," or, "Oh, that's a good way of looking at that," and that's very gratifying to see that you're getting this sort of reaction where people are they've just become so used to their surrounds that they almost take for granted.
Yeah.
And to be able to show them something, and hopefully when they're next out there at that particular location, to be able to see what you've seen in your mind, is great. It's very rewarding. But yeah, so that's long exposure landscapes. There's another one down, taking down at the
Sulphur Point by the look of it. Yep.
Quite often what I find is I'll get some photos which are mediocre, which haven't really met the grade for being a stunning landscape. So I'll quite often have a play with them and process them through a variety of different filters and plugins in Photoshop, and these are generally what are called highly processed landscapes, which is this
HPL. It's a Paul Oellermann new category, a new genre.
Which is this sort of thing. So this is taken down in the Harbour View Drive with the map in the background.
Yep.
And it's just
the end result's great, isn't it?
Yeah,
like that one.
Yeah. So that's just from playing around in Photoshop and processing it to
in a secret program that we're not going to tell them about. Yeah.
And yeah, there was quite a good reaction to those as well at the exhibition, because they tend to be very, very arty, and quite far removed from a photo. And the most common comment that I had was, "I can't believe that's a photo."
Well, in the case of that last one, it hardly is a photo anymore. It started out as a photo.
Yes. So yeah, it's that's nice that you're getting that sort of reaction as well from something like that. You
haven't got that Red Hot Pokers photo here, have you?
No,
it's one of my favourites.
No, I don't.
Okay.
It's always with these sort of things in the exhibitions.
That one sold, did it? Or
no, it didn't. It didn't sell. It's still for sale. But for bringing along images for these sort of things, you've always got to hold yourself back to which ones you're going to bring.
Yeah, you can't bring them all.
No,
sure.
No, you can't bring them all. There's only a certain amount of space. One more regular landscapes. One of my iconic images of the mount.
Yep.
This one
and looking quite a lot like a real photo.
Yes. So this tends to be the closest to what I'll term a regular photo is what I do. I love to use a technique called HDR, which is high dynamic range, which deals well with situations like that where you've got very bright parts of the scene and very dark parts of the scene, and the camera just isn't capable of capturing that in one exposure, so you've got to blend multiple exposures and it's quite effective when done right.
Well.
Yes,
it's the sort of thing that I've seen a lot of HDR photos on the web and other places, and I largely hate HDR because it's done so poorly often. It's overdone. But I mean, that last one, you could hardly see that it's done. I mean, that's the secret, isn't it? Sort of not
yes.
not overdoing it.
Yeah, to keep the effect very subtle.
Yeah.
That works out well. And then something that I've got into fairly recently is digital infrared photography. This is an area that I'm very keen to explore further my photography career. And it's yet again, it's just a different way of looking at those same subjects. Infrared light acts differently to visible light, and the way that you capture it can produce some very stunningly beautiful different images.
And yet it looks sort of real, and it's real places often.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is one of a church just out in the Western Bay. A combination of infrared and long exposure.
Is this infrared with a normal camera and an infrared filter, or is this a specially modified camera?
So that is with a specially modified camera. And
so it's ruined for everything else. It can only do infrared.
It can only do infrared, yes. In the old film days, you used infrared film.
I've still got some in the fridge if you need any.
I should imagine. But in modern digital cameras, they have an infrared blocking filter in there to block out the infrared light. And what they do with the camera modifications is they take out that filter and they put in a filter which blocks out a large part of the visible spectrum of light. So you're mainly capturing that infrared light. And with foliage and stuff like that, it can create some very beautiful images.
The green foliage goes sort of a beautiful white, doesn't it?
Yes.
And skin tones become
very soft and
just lovely looking.
Yes. And then finally, I do high-speed liquid photography, which is something completely different to everything else. But at the same time, it's still something that's very, very natural. It's stuff that happens around us.
It's natural and it's real, but we don't see it.
No, we don't.
So every time it's raining and the rain's falling in a puddle, it happens, something like that, but we don't see it.
Yeah, it all happens too fast for the eye to see.
Do you want to show that one?
That's
you brought along my favourite, I see.
Yeah, it's one of my favourites as well. There's something just very, very peaceful and elegant about it.
Well, the colours are elegant. They're just sort of blues and greens and whites and nothing much else. That's lovely.
Yeah, so that's captured with the aid of electronics and very precise timing, and because it's all needs to be very well controlled. Otherwise, you'll spend a very long, frustrating day trying to capture the collision of two.
Which can theoretically be done, but it'll drive you nuts.
Yeah.
Because of all the times it doesn't work.
It would drive you nuts.
That was what the workshops that we ran, Paul was showing us these high-speed collisions and letting people do this for themselves. Collisions and crowns, I think you call those.
What we term cream crowns.
Cream crowns.
Yeah, we're just dropping a drop of cream onto another drop of cream on a highly reflective surface, and just capturing that moment that the two impact, and you can create something quite simple.
I mean, if you hadn't told us that, if you hadn't said cream on cream and a highly reflective surface, we'd still be wondering. It's just not obvious what it is.
No,
it's sort of a wow, but what is it?
And that was very much the reaction at the exhibition from a lot of people. Was wow!
What is it?
I had no idea. Which is it's nice to be able to create something that generates a little bit of interest and intrigue.
There's this interesting division, or at least in my head, and maybe others, between photography, like just photographing what's real, what's out there, and what still looks real, and then having crossed a line in the sand into something that's very definitely art. And both sides, both ends of the spectrum are kind of obvious, but there's an interesting area in the middle. It's sort of still a photo, but there's something that's happened to it, and you're not quite sure what it is, but you like the end result. But you suspect there's some skullduggery or something clever being done in there. And you cross pretty much all of that, sort of from the art with that that one that you showed us a while ago, through to the high-speed ones are real photos in a sense, but they're unreal in the sense that it's not something that we will ever have seen or will ever see, because our eyes don't work at an 8,000th of a second.
Yes, correct.
And then sort of right through to pretty much totally straight photos. Although with a bit of your HDR, you make those work better. Now might be a good time to let you go back and tell us a bit about your journey, sort of where you came from, your life so far, and particularly where photography fitted into that.
Yeah, so I'm originally from South Africa. Grew up in South Africa.
They've got a football team there, haven't they? Rugby, I believe.
Supposedly.
Yeah.
Not a very good one.
Not a very good one.
But that's for different conversations. Grew up in South Africa. I lived there for the first 30-odd years of my life.
On the coast, inland, city,
inland,
rural?
Locally, probably equated to Hamilton.
Okay.
Medium-sized
city,
landlocked
town.
little town. A place that a lot of people don't like, but it's got a few bits going for it. That sort of thing. Out of school, I went and worked for a semi-government type organisation, and started off doing survey drafting, drawing up plans and that sort of thing, and went on and did my studies to be an engineering surveyor. And I carried on working for that organisation for 12 years. And through my employment, there was always a need for taking photos. The sites that you went to, you'd need to take photos. And a lot of my work generally tend to be out in the more rural type areas, where the scenery was quite often very.
This
very
wouldn't be
stunning.
high quality photography. This would be just a record, would it?
Yeah, just more
like a real
record.
estate agent going around, going click.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you come across these landscapes just by the fact that you're doing the work there, and you take some fairly nice landscape photos, and your limited knowledge of photography back in those days. And yeah, so I always seem to find myself with the camera and taking photos for work. Get together with
Work
mates.
supplied your camera, or
yes.
right?
So I'd be doing work functions. I'd be taking photos of people and what have you. When you're around with the mates, there's a need to take photos. You'd be the one taking the photos. So yeah, for a large part of my life back then, I was around cameras and had a passing interest in photography. In 2007, I moved out to New Zealand.
What made you move?
It was an opportunity that presented itself. The organisation that I worked for closed down completely.
That's a good reason to go, I guess.
Yeah, and it was just an opportunity to make a change. And New Zealand seemed like a good option. So I came out here, moved down to the sunny Bay of Plenty, working for engineering consultants. And it was when I moved over here that I got my first DSLR camera and started getting more into photography. learning the technical bits and pieces, because the work situation was very similar to what it was in South Africa. I'm still
Sure.
going out to these very scenic locations. My work over here as a surveyor was still generally in the rural part of the world, where you do get those lovely landscapes.
I thought you were just the guy that walked around with a spray can on the footpaths, but you get out of town as well, huh?
Yes. I did, and so yeah, I started wanting to take better photographs of these lovely landscapes, and you get better camera gear, and you start doing research online, attend photo workshops like I attended yours. I ended up doing an online diploma through the Photography Institute, which gave me a very good understanding of how cameras work, how exposure works, composition, cameras, lenses, etc.
Some people out there think you just go click and that's it, but
Yes.
there's more to it than that, isn't it?
Yeah, the fundamental to taking good photos, I feel, is understanding photography, understanding how to get a good exposure, understanding how to change your settings on your camera to create the effect that you want. And once you understand those settings, you can the world is yours. You can create what you want to create.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's easy to think some days that there's nothing that needs photographing today. I'm not seeing anything, but sort of on a good day, you realise that there's an infinite number of possibilities out there. It's just a matter of seeing them, grabbing them, doing them.
Yes, and that's what I've found with a couple of different types of photography. Generally, with landscape photography, your hours of decent photos are limited to an hour around sunrise and an hour around sunset. Whereas with the infrared and the long exposure photography, your best times of the day are
Middle of the day
in the blazing sun.
So you can be out from dawn till dusk.
Yes,
happy as a sandboy.
Can get right into it. So yeah, I became proficient in camera craft and developed a few different speciality genres as such. And since then, I've moved on from survey and no longer do survey work. It's too much like.
I thought you did.
Too much, no.
Not at all.
Too much like hard work.
Oh, you got married, that's right.
Yeah. I now do contract work for underground service locating, which allows me to spray.
Oh, you're the guy with the spray? Yeah,
yes,
okay.
I make a mess on all the footpaths and stuff, which still does get me out to those, a lot of those scenic locations. I do a fair bit of travel, and yes, the camera always goes with me.
Might be a good place. I've just heard the ref calling or whistling for half time, so might see you back after the break.
Excellent.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Hi, here I am slightly modelling a t-shirt that's come from Murray Clode. He's an artist in Tauranga. He painted this design, and a lot of people, including me, said it should be a t-shirt, Murray, and now it is. You can get them in different sizes, and you can get them off Murray's website, and they're $35. And the website is murrayclodenz@gmail.com.
And it's a
and it is
map of town?
a tribute to the London Underground tube map.
Yeah.
But with our Tauranga suburbs in it, which is totally cool. It's such a neat thing to give to someone either overseas or wander around town and one yourself.
Cool.
The whistle's gone. We're in the second half now. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back, Paul.
Thank you.
I mentor a number of photographers, and one of the common questions I get, and a very common question I think worldwide, is something like, I'm a I like my photography. I'm a keen amateur. I'd like to become a professional. It looks like a lot more fun than what I do. I saw an interesting survey done on, it might have been Photo Shelter, where they asked tens of thousands of people, I think, are you an amateur, an aspiring professional, a semi-professional, or a professional? And the answer was interesting. Is hardly anyone was an amateur, and hardly anyone was a full-time professional. About 80% of the people said that they were either aspiring professionals or semi-professionals. So it's obviously something that a lot of people would like to do, and many people don't have much of an idea of what to do, which is understandable because it's a lot of what makes a professional career is in a state of flux anyway. But would you like to summarise sort of how it's going for you? I mean, you obviously started out as an amateur, and even when I first met you, you were hoping to become semi-professional or maybe professional. Tell us something about that journey and how it's going.
Yeah, so at present, I would probably classify myself as a semi-professional photographer. I don't make all of my income from photography, but I do devote a fair amount of my time and do derive a part income from the craft. It's interesting. Coming from what was being an employee to having to make money from something is different.
It's a big jump for a lot of people.
It is. It is a very big jump. You need to have that passion, that love of photography, because otherwise, if you get into it full time, it'll just become a job where you just end up taking photos, and you lose that enjoyment.
Without the passion, it's just not going to work. Full stop. It's probably that simple.
Correct. But yeah, it's been an interesting journey thus far. Obviously, not being a full-time professional, I haven't had to dive into it fully.
Could you become a full-time professional? I mean, I know you'd possibly like to, but sort of looking ahead, could you see it as a real possibility with the kind of photography you do or may like to do?
Quite potentially, yes, but probably not from photography sales alone. It's one thing that is fairly general throughout the world is people trying to survive purely on photography sales is very difficult. There's a few people that have become very successful and do very well from photography sales, but generally...
But even some of them are struggling.
Oh, yes.
I mean, I've been selling them for 30 or 40 years, and my high water was about 10 or 15 years ago, and it's the same for many other professionals. And in that time, it's just got harder and harder.
Yes. So to become a full-time professional photographer, I would need to diversify into various different avenues.
Do you know what they would be, or is that an unknown still?
Well, probably potentially running photography tours, possible workshops, and along the lines of where you'd
always have a wife that worked full time.
Yes,
and a well-paying job.
That would be very helpful. But running, very much along the lines of what you've done with your career.
Make it up as I go.
Yes.
Yeah.
Largely yes.
Yeah.
But run workshops, produce fantastic photography that people feel they need.
Yeah.
And to set yourself apart. And probably the biggest thing is the business side of it. It's not so much taking photos.
That's actually the easy bit, isn't it?
Yes,
Because
yes,
that's where your passion is. But
yes,
being a good business person is actually quite hard
yes.
for a lot of us.
There's the
For the artistic kinds of people,
Yes.
it's possibly very hard.
Yeah, because it is running a business, same as any other business, and there's the understanding of marketing and finding clients, securing clients, and keeping those clients happy, and yeah, just keeping a steady flow of work coming in, and where I'm at now with primarily landscape photography, to do that full time in a fairly smallish market. Like,
It's a small country, and there's many other landscape photographers
yes,
who would like to be
yes,
doing it too, and some of who are doing it.
Yes, many other very good landscape photographers.
They're the problem ones, aren't they? The good ones.
Yes,
Yeah.
they always seem to be a problem. But yeah, so I would very much like to be doing it full time, but
Maybe we should meet here in 5 years' time and see how you're
see
going.
where we are down the track.
Something that probably interests a lot of people, and especially the photographers out there, are the story of someone like yourself, sort of from a keen amateur photographer through to, can I maybe get some of these published? Can I maybe sell them? Is there even the possibility of a full-time career in it? It's something it's a question that would interest a lot of people, I think, or the answer would, if there is an answer.
Yeah, well, I think the answer would greatly vary from person to person.
And from day to day, yeah.
Yes, and from day to day. But for myself, just developing as a photographer, as an amateur photographer, and finding these niche genres in photography, you tend to generate an interest in your photography when you're doing stuff that's A, good, and B, different. And interest is always good, because that makes you think, if there's interest, then maybe people are willing to pay for,
as long as
for
it's
your
not
work.
just other photographers wanting to use your techniques to do their own.
Yes. And yeah, so that has been how it's more or less how it's developed over time. Is there's been that interest from other photographers and people, the general public.
How do you promote yourself?
So
Because you have to, don't you, to make it, market yourself somehow.
Yeah. So I have my website and a Facebook page.
Right. But what draws people to that? I mean, there's a billion websites, or whatever the number is. What gets people to the Paul Oellermann website rather than somewhere else?
It's things like holding an exhibition, where people come along and they see your work, grab your business card and have a look.
And possibly this video is something that followed on from that exhibition.
Yes, it is directly from the exhibition. But in this day and age, probably for something like photography, your best form of marketing would be your word of mouth.
Yeah.
Marketing, where you do good stuff, and people see it, and they tell their friends about it and work colleagues. And they go have a look, and it grows from there. I think the challenge is to be consistently evolving as a photographer, creating new works in different works to keep people interested, at the same time as doing your regular marketing, and getting out there and going around to galleries and trying to get your work up in galleries.
But you walk into a gallery and you say, I'm a photographer. do their eyes glaze over and they hope you'll leave soon, or do they say, a photographer, welcome, or probably somewhere in between, depending on how you approach them?
Yes, generally it's the first
Yeah, I thought
the
it might
first
be.
scenario. And this
So how do you get them interested, if you do?
well, it seems to be taking something physical there.
Like walking in with this?
Yeah, taking I've got a portfolio of printed photos,
Yeah,
and then there's the images in the frame.
yeah.
So take it along so that they can see what it is that you're creating.
Yeah.
To go along with a business card, and hope that they're gonna have a look at your website, look at what they perceive as photos on your website. Generally, the reaction would be, yeah, sure, I'll have a look, and that's the last you hear from them. So yeah, it's that doing the hard yards and getting your work out there and getting it seen by people. I've got another exhibition coming up in October. The part of the Tauranga Arts Festival, an exhibition called the Art of Technology, which is a whole series of artists who are exhibiting their works where technology has played a part in their work. And some of my photography, like
It's very definitely in that category.
the high-speed liquid photography, the long exposure landscape photography, and even the highly processed images. They're all sort of beyond what...
They're all beyond the Facebook by a long shot.
Yes,
but they're also they require.
Yeah, they require technology.
Both your vision, but also a lot of technology.
Yeah, so there's that exhibition coming up.
Is that over a period of weeks?
Yes, so that'll be on for 3 weeks.
Where will it be?
We're still waiting for a venue.
Okay.
The organisers are still trying to secure a venue. They might have by now, but yeah, the details will be in Tauranga Art Festival's.
Okay, and artwork's for sale there?
Yes.
Okay.
My artwork will be for sale there.
Maybe you should call them artworks rather than photos, or get the word art in there.
Yes.
Because photos are still Facebook to a lot of people, which is why their eyes glaze over when you walk in and say you're a photographer.
Yeah, well, I try to make it clear to people that what I do is photographic-based fine art.
That's a good line,
Generally get away from that. It's just a photo concept to something that's beyond that.
It might be a good place to bring up this idea of, we mentioned it a bit earlier, that, what was it, 350 million photos going onto Facebook today, 350 million tomorrow, and most of those no one needs to see apart from a few friends or whatever. But what committed, good, visionary photographers are doing is something very different to that. Do you want to talk a bit about the difference between those two? I mean, both use cameras, but that's about all they have in common, really. Yeah,
so a lot of what we call the selfie generation and the holiday photographers, it's there for a purpose. It's there for them to capture their memories, which is fine. But like you say, the rest of the world doesn't really need to see those. A lot of those photos.
Or any of them, really.
Whereas from a higher end photography point of view, more professional point of view, there's a lot more that goes into it. There's planning, often for landscapes, location scouting, and planning the shoot. You'll quite often see a landscape and plan to come back to it when the conditions are right, the weather the tide, etc. When all the conditions are right, and quite often you'll arrive at the location, set up your camera gear, and when the time is just right, just click the camera and you'll be done. It'll be the shot that you wanted.
Or you may need to come back again and again and again.
Yes. Quite often that'll be the case that you'll need to come back to the location several times to get the shot that you wanted to create that vision that you had in your mind when you saw that landscape.
What I've found quite a lot is that I will plan to go somewhere because it seems a good idea, a good place to go, and I'll go there, and what I had in mind just isn't going to happen. But something else different happens that's just as good or better, and so I shoot off on a tangent quite happily.
Yes.
Do you get much of that?
Yes. Oh, a
All the time.
A lot of that. You'll go to a place where you had a certain photo in mind, and that photo either doesn't materialize or you capture it. But there's so much else happening around. While you're there, it's great to be able to capture all of that and stumble across something that you hadn't planned. I sort of see there as being two types of photos. There's the made photo, where there's a lot of planning that's
The
gone.
created versus the snapped.
Yeah,
Maybe.
The found versus the created photo. Where you've taken a lot of time in figuring out the weather conditions and your tide, whether the tide's right, if it's something involving the ocean, sunset times, clouds, etc., etc. So there can be a lot of planning that goes into certain photos.
Yeah.
But there's other photos where you stumble across where everything is just right at that particular
For
moment
something
in time.
else.
Yes.
Yeah. And which is where if you're tunnel focused and you're there just to tick that box and just to get that photo, you could easily miss that opportunity, the serendipity that's happening out there. And
Yes.
I suspect a lot of amateur and maybe other photographers do. They have something in mind and they're not open to the wonder of all the other possibilities.
Yes, it is a bit of the downside of trying to do photography professionally and make money from it. Is you trying to capture specific things, and it's very similar to a bit in the way of the selfie generation, that you're always trying to capture the moment and capture that certain image, that you lose sight of what's going on around you, and you almost forget to just enjoy the moment.
Yeah.
Enjoy the sunset that's happening, or turn around 180 degrees and enjoy what's happening on the other side. You're so focused on what's happening through the viewfinder of your camera, you forget about everything else. So it's sometimes nice to just stop and put the camera away and just enjoy where you are and what's happening.
One of my favourite lines from anywhere it's a line from a Paul Simon song, and it's "These are the days of miracles and wonder," and that kind of bounces around my head, and it's sort of roughly how I see it. Sort of every day there's just a lot of wonder out there, and my job as a photographer is to find some of those bits, and that sounds very similar to what you're saying.
Yes, there is a lot of amazing things happening around us, and it would be lovely to be able to capture everything. But unfortunately, there's too much.
It's an interesting area, this, isn't it? Because I've quite often thought pretty much exactly what you just said a minute ago, which is if I'm here just to photograph whatever it is, then am I actually enjoying the moment? And the answer usually is, well, no, I can't really do both. But if I get it right, then I can enjoy it later, and thousands or maybe millions of other people can too. And so I console myself with that. And then when the moment's passed, if there's a moment, then I can kind of relax and just enjoy where I am. So it's an interesting area, that sort of being so focused that you're just getting the photo or enjoying the wider picture.
Yes. I think that is the secret, the key as such, is not to get so engrossed in what you're doing that you forget about what
Enjoying
is
life.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. It is very much what is important, is enjoying life.
One of the things I remember saying recently to one of the photographers I was mentoring, who was looking at taking some photos for a potential client, was, and she showed me some possibilities, and I said, make sure that what you take along makes them do two things. One is go, wow, and the other one is to realize that they couldn't go and take that photo. You know, to bring enough to the table that they don't just think, oh, well, I could have got that, or my sister could have got it, but sort of think, wow, that's, you know, we're getting something special here. And your photography has obviously got to that stage quite a while ago, which is cool, and which is why it's working for you and will continue to work. Want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so I do commission work from time to time, and the thing to remember with commission work is it's what the client wants. They will quite often have a particular
Is what the
brief.
client wants exactly what the client says, or can you sometimes bring more or different as well? And the client goes, oh, I hadn't thought you could do that. Great, thanks for doing it. Do you get anything like that?
The client briefs will quite often be fairly general because a lot they can't do themselves. In this,
If they could, they would.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
save them the money.
In this day and age, a lot of companies try to save money and do it all themselves. So for those situations where they can't do what it is they want to do themselves, they will turn to the likes of a professional photographer.
They can't do what? Technically, artistically, or something else, or what?
Any one of those, or all of them together. The one of the commissions.
What be a? Oh, okay. You're just about to tell me what a typical commission might
so one
look
of
like.
the commissions was there's a local engineer, and they're in the same office as a survey firm, and they've moved into fairly new offices, and they were wanting some artwork up on their walls. They were wanting something which reflected both of their companies, and they were very much interested in wardrobe collision. This
Because they knew you did that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And the only constraints of their brief was the colours to keep, because the survey company's colours were blue and the engineering company's colours were green. So they wanted a mix of those colours.
Which made you go away from your bright colours to that more subdued palette, and you ended up with what I think is your very best photo.
Yes,
So thank goodness for that commission.
Yeah, so they did a whole series of photos for them, and took them all as examples, and they picked their two favourites and did those up. And
so what you took in was all blue and green, was it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Very, very much along the lines of what this one is.
And they didn't choose that one?
No, they didn't choose that one.
Oh, silly them.
No.
Oh, well.
Which I'm quite happy with, because I get to keep this one.
Yeah,
this
good.
One there. But yes, commission work, you've got to bear in mind that it's the client that's paying, and at the end of the day, they need to be happy with what they're getting, and what they're getting needs to fit in with the purpose that they need it for.
Yeah.
So quite often there will be set constraints on what they need, colours, if it's landscape, whether it's there's certain things that they need in with the landscapes, if they need people in, or the landscape needs to be devoid of people, or whatever it is, the overriding factor needs to be the client's wants and
The main
needs.
constraint I've found with clients over the years is the budget, usually.
Yes.
Like, we want everything, we want it wonderful, and we want it dirt cheap if possible.
That's pretty,
Some version of that?
Pretty standard. And
Which is the same for every artist through history, probably.
Yes.
Or most of them.
Which has seen the meteoric rise of stock photography, which is, as you know, has basically killed it as a source of a decent source of income.
Because what? Sorry.
Stock photography.
The fact that everyone's doing it, or
yeah, there's so much of it out there that people have just got such a wide choice. So companies.
Oh, and the prices have just kept on being pushed down because there's so much. Yeah, and there's some new business models that have come in.
Yes.
Yeah, I know all about that. I earned 4 times as much
yes.
15 years ago, but that's another matter. Paul, in 5 years' time, all going well with following winds and the ship not sinking, what ideally, in a perfect world, would you like to be doing?
I'd love to be retired taking photos for pleasure, but that's not going to happen. So what happened earlier on this year is my wife and myself moved out to a property out in Katikati. 7 acres of beautifully developed garden.
How many acres?
7 acres.
Wow. Big lawnmower needed.
It's not so much lawn. Well, there is a lot of lawn, but a lot of
mostly bush and
plant life. Yes.
Great.
So first off, I'm along with Pauline, we're wanting to develop our what we would call floral art photography, which fits in very nicely with the garden, and develop those gardens to a point where we be running accommodation. There's a big shed there that we want to turn into a gallery for our work.
And a cafe?
Possibly
cafe
a cafe.
Brings the people.
Yes.
Needs to be a cafe for some of us.
Cafe's always good. And possibly a venue for wedding photography as well, and weddings. I don't envisage myself doing wedding photography
but you could organise someone else to do it at your place.
Most certainly, yes. And then use it as a base, possibly a base for doing photographic tours in the Bay of Plenty in Coromandel, for tourists, locals. There is some fantastic scenery, even in the Western Bay of Plenty.
Yeah, we tend to think that we need to go down to the South Island or somewhere else, but what we've got here is not bad, is it?
No, not at all. And we're very close to the Coromandel.
Yeah.
Close to Rotorua, Whakatane and White Island. So potentially photographic tours, running workshops and photo tours in our garden as such.
Sounds close to idyllic, actually. Sounds great.
Even
if only some of it comes to pass, it sounds pretty good.
But yeah, that is the rough.
You get people looking at this saying, "Can I come and carry your camera bag, Paul? I want to be part of that."
That would be nice. The more the merrier. But yeah, that's sort of the rough direction that we wanted to go, along with developing my existing genres of work, the long exposure landscapes, infrared. I'm really keen to push forward with infrared and figure out new ways of capturing stuff. The high-speed liquid photography, keep pushing forward with that, and hopefully finding new and unique stuff to photograph and in different ways. I always find that the best way to keep moving is just
To keep moving.
keep evolving,
Yeah.
and keep changing. That's
I do quite a lot of reading and thinking about photography. It's what I do. And one of the interesting areas is the area of creativity. Where does creativity come from? And in particular, can you encourage it? And one interesting idea I came across was that a lot of the most creative people in the world are not just in the arts, but all in the sciences, the Einstein type people, is just their almost childlike playfulness. They just try stuff, they have fun, they do it, they try new things, a lot of which don't work, and they keep doing new things, and all of a sudden something does work.
Yes. Related to that a little bit, I find being technically proficient with the camera and knowing how to adjust settings on the camera, etc., helps immensely in being creative, in not having to worry about is my camera on the right setting, etc., etc.
Have I got the lens cap on still?
Yes. Although that sometimes still does happen.
We won't tell anyone about that, will we? No.
But yeah, being technically proficient frees you up to just be creative and just play. And like you say, you happen across stuff. You mentioned earlier about meeting my wife through your coffee evenings. And it was one of those.
Are you still thanking me for that, or?
Yes, myself.
Okay, good, great, good to see.
It was one of those images of the psychedelic soap bubbles that Pauline really, really likes, and that was one of those happy accidents where I just happened across experimenting with different stuff, and I just stumbled across something that's pretty unique, that nobody had really done before, and just created something different.
And Pauline sidled up to you and said, "How did you do that, handsome?" You said, "Oh, shucks," and it went from there.
Yeah,
something like that.
Went from there, pretty much.
Yeah. It's a hard question to answer well. That what would you be doing in 5 years? But that was a really good answer, and sounds far too good an answer. Break a leg. No, I hope it comes to pass for you. The ref's saying it's about time to wrap up. Anything you'd like to finish on? Any advice to others? Anything you'd like to say? Or if not advice to others, any promotional messages or anything at all that I haven't asked about?
Yeah, so like I said a minute ago, my recommendation to all aspiring photographers or amateur photographers is understand your camera, understand your photography gear, have an understanding of photography rules, as they call them. What makes photos work? And once you've got all those basics down, it then frees you up to try different things and capture images without fear.
Yeah.
And create something fantastic.
There's an artist. I'm not trying to interrupt, but I am interrupting, but continue after this. A well-known, pretty famous artist whose name I forget, and he said something like, I like to be orderly and in my work and know what I'm doing so that I can be violent and creative in what I achieve, or something to that effect.
Yeah,
which is pretty much a paraphrase of what you're saying, like know your tools, know the rules, and then go forth and create.
Yes, that to me is exactly it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you're obviously doing that, and the results are great, and it's coming together as a possible full-time profession, or it's heading towards it.
Heading towards it, yes. There probably will always be other bits and pieces along the way, doing different stuff, which is
And there's
always
no
fun.
shame in that. I mean, there's nothing that says you have to be full-time professional. You can be whatever you want to be.
Yes,
That could be 43% professional photographer and
yes.
whatever the other percentage is, running weddings and flower photography at your place in Caddy or whatever.
Yes,
Just
that's
whatever
exactly
seems like a good life.
The future looks fairly bright and
Your future looks great, Paul.
Full of potential. Yes.
So I think we can probably stop about there. It's a good place to finish. Thanks, Paul. It's been great, and all the very best.
Thank you, Kim.
Cheers.
All right.